What happens when you have a small team spread all over the world and you're the learning and development manager? All this and more coming up on The Perfect Route. Welcome back to another episode. I'm Dr. Bill Sodeman, and I'm pleased to have as our guest today, Alicia Henríquez. Hello, Alicia.
Hey, Bill. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. It's great to have you here. Could you tell me a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to?
I am the head of people at LiveBlocks. We are a dev tooling company that is essentially enabling human and AI collaboration in digital products. So, super exciting product to get to work on and for. I've been in the role now for 3.5 years, and I have the incredible opportunity and privilege to essentially build a people and organizational operating system from the ground up. I was employee number 9. Yes, it's just a really great place to be.
That's awesome. And that's liveblocks.io for people who are looking for it online.
Yes.
Awesome. Employee number 9.
Hmm.
And that's good that they brought you in as the head of people so early. I've seen companies that have waited a little bit to do that with HR and live to regret it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, it actually was a very lucky opportunity that I found them. And it really came down to, do they need someone in HR this early because they need a lot of help or and like red flags, or is it because they're actually really investing intentionally and thoughtfully in a people function to help scale? And it was thankfully the latter, which is
Oh,
why
good.
I'm still here. And yeah, it's been really fun, and exactly where I was hoping to kind of progress in my career.
I love it when you say that it's fun. There's so many people in HR and learning and development who put on the brave face and say it's fun, but for you, I can tell it really is.
Yeah, no, it truly is, and I know that I am in a very lucky position to be able to say that. I think I also recognize just the privilege of it, having had all of my previous experiences
Mhm.
where it wasn't as fun and it was frustrating, which is why I was looking for something to build from the ground up.
Exactly. So, what pulled you into learning and development, and how's your thoughts on it changed over time?
Yeah, I actually started my career as a high school teacher. I got my master's to be a middle school English teacher, ended up teaching Spanish for 7 years, primarily in a charter school network here in New York City. And to me, learning and development and teaching just go hand in hand. I grew my career as an educator in then supporting learning functions, language learning functions. Like so, the Spanish department, I essentially built that. And honestly, because I had that experience at a charter school where I helped scale the school from 60 kids and 13 staff to then now I think that they're at like almost 1,000 kids and 100 staff. I really learned a lot from that experience and how to build from the ground up, how to start from scratch and navigate all the various growth phases. And so I was with my charter network, shout out Uncommon Schools, for about 6 years, and then wanted to transition into corporate learning and development. And I had the opportunity to build learning functions again from the ground up in fitness, franchise, food, so like restaurants, and
Mhm.
health tech. One of the things that was really challenging that I'm sure many of your listeners will feel is that when someone would come to me and say, "Hey, you're new, you're L&D, yay, we need you. Can you build this training program for me?" When I started digging around into what it is that we're actually trying to solve, it wasn't necessarily about the training. It was about accrued organizational debt that was then having a negative impact. And so
Mhm.
sometimes training wasn't the fix. It was something else organizationally, that because that strong foundation wasn't there because of all of this accrued organizational or HR debt, it made it that much more difficult for businesses to scale. And so I joined LiveBlocks. It just so happened that the timing worked out the way it did. And yeah, I get to do that. I get to be really thoughtful and intentional about how we are developing what I call the organizational operating system of LiveBlocks so that we can mitigate that debt before we accrue too much of it.
That is so interesting that you phrase it as organizational debt, because that's a term that outside of L&D we don't hear a lot about. But it's a lot like writing your organization IOUs. Oh, we'll fix this eventually. It'll get fixed. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it's I borrowed it from engineering. They talk about like, debt in their code base, et cetera. And I think this is another thing that I learned so much from learning and development. It's such a privilege to work in L&D because you interface with so many different business functions. And so through each function, I would like take things that I would learn along the way and apply it to my context. And so to me, this idea of HR debt, organizational debt, is yeah, basically moving so quickly that you don't do things the right way, and then you never go back to try to fix it. And so, or because you don't have the resources or the time or the knowledge, and so for us, the way that I think of an organizational operating system is think about your phone or think about your laptop. There is an operating system to make that work, right?
Mhm.
And every now and then we get those alerts that you need to upgrade your operating system. And the purpose for that is so that it can, run your apps faster. It has a new fix because there was a bug. It's recognizing that the way things were is not the way that you're going to be able to continue forward. And I think that that applies so well to our organizations, especially in startups where things are constantly changing, that it is even more critical for us to pause and say, hey, we've been doing this thing for like 6 months now. Is this still the right way to go given where we want to be 6 months from now? What needs to change? How do we need to update our system? And so alongside my founders at the time, we defined the areas that would be part of our operating system. And so that includes everything from how do you hire? The participation to authority. How do you make decisions?
Mhm.
To how do you meet? How do you do performance management? How do you do work? Where do you like save things and transfer knowledge? All of those various areas, and then defined how we wanted to do it for our current time and place. And then we built structure around that. We built processes and philosophies and systems to do that. And so now it's part of my annual work to go back into our operating system and say, hey, where do we need to update things? And as an example, right now, a big area where we are updating our operating system is roles and functions. My function looks really different now than it did 2, 3 years ago, and the responsibilities that I've taken on. Again, welcome to startups. And so I'm redefining that for myself and for my team because at the end of the day, an operating system is focused on ensuring three things: clarity, cohesion, so alignment, and effectiveness. And
Mhm.
so everything that we do always goes back to how are we providing clarity? How are we providing alignment? And how are we ensuring our effectiveness as a company?
And I'm so glad you mentioned effectiveness, which is, doing the right things when organizations often emphasize efficiency and doing things right, even though those might not be the right things to do. Um, it's refreshing to hear that. Can you share a recent initiative you think truly captured the strategic potential of L&D inside LiveBlocks or another organization you've been with?
Yeah. I think one of the things that is usually, not that we forget about is this idea of um, when does manager training happen? And
Mm,
so in all of my previous companies, I would come in, they would say, "Hey, we need manager training." Then I say, "Well, what is a manager supposed to do here? I don't know. Okay, let's start with that. Manager standards, let's write that down. What are all the skills, etc." And I think one of the things that I changed my perspective on as I would deliver manager trainings and everything was that I don't think that manager training should start when someone becomes a manager. It needs to start from as soon as they come to your organization when they're onboarding, and that's now become kind of part of our operating system. And so, one of the things that I've done with my team is introduce them to frameworks and ways of working that I would use in my traditional manager training programs, and now everybody at the company does it. So, as an example, introducing the idea of, I love Patrick Lencioni's Five Dysfunctions of Teams.
mhm.
I've re I've changed it up a bit to call it, the five pillars of teams. And so everybody that joins LiveBlocks in their onboarding, we talk about what are the five pillars of effective teams? How have you seen this pillar, fall in the past? What is trust? What is the actual formula for building trust? What are ways that we build trust? What are examples of how we build trust? Because I think it's really important that we start introducing those things so that folks are able to then use those skills when they're working with one another, and then if and when they are ready and there's an opportunity to step up as a project lead, as a team lead, as a people manager, they've already built that some of those skills.
Okay. Um, and skill-based learning is very much on point these days. Um, when we think about skills-based learning, we often think of it in one of two ways. Either it's a very expedient thing, like someone needs to learn these skills now in order to be productive, or it's more of a career development piece. Um, but it sounds like you're definitely siding on the career development aspect of skills based learning.
Yeah, definitely career development. I also, we have a team with really long tenure. Most of my team has been with the company for 3 years now,
Oh, wow.
and yeah, we're still very small. We're only 14, but we're globally distributed. We're across 10 different time zones, and so again, thinking about that intentionality, making sure we're focused on effectiveness, alignment, and clarity, making it really clear to our team of what we expect and how we work, and welcome to live blocks, like we're going to talk about these things. And so when you also have a team that has been together for 3 years and working together for 3 years, it's also really important for us to find ways to and for me to give opportunities of how can you continue to develop, maybe not in your specifically in your engineering skills, but in your people skills and your teamwork skills and your collaboration skills, that you can continue to take that on, and not just in the workplace, but I think a lot of manager skills are effective outside in your personal life too.
Mhm.
So you can have a better conversation with your partner or your parent. Or frankly, your child. And so that's the way that I view it too. Of how can we continue to share knowledge in that way?
Yeah, and the career development does go walk hand in hand with personal development too. I've long believed that people bring their whole selves to work, especially if they're working from home. It's impossible to leave your work life in the car when your commute is across the living room.
Yep. Yep. No, 100%. And again, I went from charter school education into corporate L&D because I wanted to be in diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging,
Hmm.
accessibility work. And similarly to how I shifted how I think about how things scale, like I think, especially for smaller organizations, any DEIB work, any work that is trying to enable employees to do their best work by being able to bring how much of themselves they want into the workplace. Um, you have to be really intentional, and it's embedded in everything you do throughout an employee's entire life cycle or experience with you and your
Hmm.
company and your brand. And so, that's definitely something that resonates a lot with how I build and how I think about L&D and my function, of how do we meet folks where they're at. Yeah, sure, I know that most of my engineers do not want to be people managers. That is very clear. We've talked about this over and over. So that's why we have two separate ways of how we have career progression, and our leveling, um, and uh, and so within that, yeah, just because you're going to be a people manager, um, doesn't mean you're not going to learn how to give and receive effective feedback. That's just going to be something that, as an organization, is important to us.
Hmm. That's a good point about that the whole controversy about people managers, and it's hard not to have to build some skills around working with people in any organization. It's sometimes I don't know if it's just um, a dodge, or if it's something else that makes people want to avoid that that relationship management piece. But there you go.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's two things, right? I think uh, we've all had bad bosses.
Mhm.
We've probably all been bad bosses, those of us who have had that experience. And I think when you have been a little bit jaded previously of what it means to be a manager, what it means to be a boss, people avoid that. And understandably, you don't have a great example. Like why? And then there's the personal piece to it, right? Some people just like really want to work on the what as opposed to the who. And
Yeah.
that's totally fine. But I think as organizations, just like you think about who are all your different types of learners, how do they all learn differently, you want to approach your employees that way too. So I'll give you an example. In my previous company, we were a health tech company, and we had what was it, like 10 or 12 different business functions because we had
Mhm.
everything from couriers who delivered medication, to the clinical staff, like the pharmacists who were actually, making sure that the prescriptions were right, to the staff that was dealing with insurance companies, and doctors' offices, and then the sales team, and then your whole corporate functions. So we had a lot of different folks, and their needs were all different in how they were doing their jobs. But at the end of the day, we all came back to, what our values. We were very strong with what our values were and how that played out in the customer experience. And so bringing that in onboarding, was really important to us. And that was a huge, significant project, that our leadership at the time really focused on was, how do we bring together all these separate uh, groups of employee population to make sure that everyone understands the why behind what we're doing, how the
Mhm.
company works, so we're delivering a great experience at all levels. Um, because yeah, I do think that can be challenging. And yes, you would just based off of the employee group or the person, but now much smaller scale. That was like an almost 2,000 person company.
Mhm.
Now it's the challenge is we're fully remote, and most of there's only two that are US born, and the rest of us are all, non American. And when you have different cultures, different ways of working, different views on work than North American culture, it really plays a part. And so you have to define what your expectations are as an organization so that nothing gets literally lost in translation. And so those people skills become even more important in how we communicate. And it becomes more of this is how we do things at LiveBlocks, or this is how we do things at insert your company here, as
Mhm.
opposed to this is how Bill does it and Alicia does it and so on.
Yeah, and that's a great point about culture building, um, because, if there's anything we've seen after the pandemic, it's the rise of the global company. If it wasn't obvious before the pandemic, it certainly became obvious afterwards, and it's, it there one of the neighbors down the hall has a doormat that says, "Check your energy before you get into the house." And
Mm.
I see that when I do my walk around the hall, and that reminds me, okay, I need to remember that it's yeah, I'm Bill and I'm operating my own business, and everything's good, but I need to acknowledge where everybody else is coming from, and and especially since I'm a army of one here. But with an organization of 14, that is a that's a pretty big lift for a learning and development mission right there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it it can be, in terms of, I have to do everything,
Mhm.
on my own, but the team, because we've done such a good job from the very beginning of when folks apply or when we reach out, to folks who join us, we made it really clear about what's expected, and
Okay.
how we operate. And yeah, that has meant that some folks who would not do our onboarding and did not engage in the way that we expected them to in their first 30 days, we've had to, decide that it wasn't the right fit. And now we've gotten better at how do we do that earlier on, just like any company does. But we make it really clear about, this is just how we work here, and this is, making sure that, again, bringing it back to the operating system, that's putting your culture in action. I think what you bring up with COVID is that so many companies thought the ping pong tables and the snacks and proximity was culture, and they
Mhm.
use that as the crutch for culture, because you didn't have to think about it. You saw how people spoke to each other, and so you started speaking that way. You sat in a meeting and you heard this executive do something or use a tool, then that's what you suggested your team do too. And so without that proximity, you have to be a lot more intentional and thoughtful. And I think that that is how we saw that big shift of the companies that never had defined, that never had operationalized how they work, how they do things, how they communicate, um, what they do and do not do as part of their company. Those were the companies that had a lot of challenges. And I think now, especially when we're talking about fully remote and going back to the office and things like that, I think that the most important piece is always remembering, like, well, what's your purpose with it? What are you trying to
Mhm.
accomplish? And it, bringing people together to communicate more effectively is not actually going to change much if you don't actually put the processes in place and the expectations in place and communicate them to actually make that happen. And so I think, yeah, it's so important to define all of that from the get go in, for example, an operating system.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a really good point about return to office. It's not a magic cure all. Um, let's see. Um, are there other areas that um, seem to be underdeveloped in your current programs that besides the ones that we've talked about, or and how would you be identifying and addressing those?
So I think for me, one of the biggest areas that I'm thinking about is because we are global, because we are fully remote, because we're a really small team with really ambitious goals and really busy, plus the time zone difference. I'm constantly trying to think of ways to leverage more async micro learnings. So what I mean by that is instead of like a formal training program, how can I drop in little nuggets of learnings? And so, as an example, uh, how can I leverage Slack bots for to give you a very specific example? So I kept on noticing things like teammates saying, "Hey, can you give me feedback on this thing?" And then there would be miscommunication, and there would be lack of clarity of what type of feedback they wanted, when they needed feedback by, who this was for, like all that context. And so asks would get lost, and then that has implications if we're trying to get things done effectively and efficiently. And so I use Lovable to help me, and I don't code,
Right.
but to help me create a Slack bot that anytime someone said, "Hey, can I get feedback on this?" How could it would prompt to say, "Looks like you're asking for feedback. Do you have a clear ask of what type of feedback you're looking for and a timeline of when you want that feedback by?" Just to kind of like, again, as a almost like a little micro way of prompting folks to think about these things when they're doing that, and again, change the behavior because at the end of the day, all of our training programs aim to change some sort or create some sort of behavior change. Um, and so I've been playing around with that a little bit, or again, other ways for folks to be more clear in their asks and how we're communicating on Slack instead of saying giving a training on you know uh, how to how to effectively capture when a decision needs to be made or has been made. I've been playing around right now with reactees, which I've created a specific um, uh, reaction emoji in Slack that
Mm.
anytime someone uses it, it automatically feeds it to a Slack channel that will keep track of it. And so, for example, we just did a whole pricing update. And that was my way of just keeping track of all the decisions that were being made in Slack that were getting lost in threads so that then we could go back to them. And so I think that these aren't your traditional ways of learning, but I think that they are all ways of changing behaviors that are for, again, providing clarity, alignment, and effectiveness.
Oh, cool.
Um, yeah. And then we've and so I've done these things, but I haven't completely rolled them out yet. And so that's where I wanted to kind of dig into more of what are some other ways to, have these little micro moments of learning to help the organization in very clear ways where work is actually happening.
I love the way that you've got um, that lovable app just working its way into the conversation on Slack. So it does what we've always wanted computers to do, and that is like actually keep track of things for us that we kind of take for granted, or we'll just shove into a hole in memory and say, "Yeah, I'll remember this," and you don't remember this.
Yeah, no, I'm especially as, there's stuff going like I can't hold anything in my head anymore.
Oh
So,
yeah,
you need to find all the other ways to mitigate it.
yeah. My phone is my phone is really the reminder beast. It's always reminding me to do things, or I've got a timer running to keep me on track. Just because you're right, it is impossible to keep everything running in your head.
Yeah.
Um, and it sounds like this is a way to make some of the learning engaging for your team at LiveBlocks. What are some other ways that you use to make sure the learning is accessible and relevant within LiveBlocks?
Yeah. So, one of the things that we introduced and again want to be doing more of because I think it's so valuable, is we introduced so we have a knowledge sharing Slack channel, where folks
Mhm.
just add articles or anything interesting that's happening in the industry, that's happening with tools that we're using, whatever the case may be. But what was really great was I do quarterly check-ins with my team where I just make sure that I've talked to everybody at least once, one-on-one every quarter, and we just dive into, ev- I have certain questions, but out of that, there was one of our engineers. Who talked about how he really wanted to just continue to learn from our more senior engineers and principal engineers because he was actually going from a more like UX to like front end to exploring more back end. And because we're small, we can do that. We can like move people around on different projects
Mhm.
very easily. And so he brought up this idea. And so it was something that I've been wanting to do for a long time of having folks like present on a topic that they're passionate about. But it wasn't until this specific person said it and I was able to have a partner to kind of like get it moving and going forward were we actually able to launch it. And so we started calling it knowledge sharing in real life. And now we call it Blocks Talks, kind of
Oh,
like TED Talks. And the
okay.
premise is that we someone offers up a topic to share and talk about with the rest of the team, and it can be personal or professional. And you can also nominate people to talk about something that you want them to talk about. And so, one of our principal engineers did a really great talk uh, that everybody was really excited about the Mikado method, which is like a method on how to solve bugs or different problems
Mhm.
as an engineer. And, he's very highly respected and has a lot of experience. And so that was so exciting for everybody to be able to hear him talk about the method that he uses and how he problem solves. And again, taking something that, we could have done a training on, but this was instead more employee generated and supported and encouraged. And so he did that presentation, and then we've done that, and then we've also done, um, we nominated someone to tell us about all the cool things he builds in his house because he's a tinkerer
Oh, neat.
at heart, and so like he has a 3D printer and a CNC machine, and so he basically did a Cribs episode of all of the really cool things and automations that he's done in his house, and again, as a remote team that's so distributed, these are the moments where we can like come together and reinforce this idea that we can all learn from each other. Everybody has an array of talents. One of our values is revel in your craft, and our crafts, are run the gamut. So
Mhm.
that has become a really great way of engaging with the team, of connecting in really authentic, genuine ways, and also helping reinforce things like thoughtful ways to approach problem solving as an engineer. So yeah, that's one of the things that we've done.
I love that, and it's it kind of reminds me of doing field trips when I was a kid in school. Only now the field trip can be anywhere, and we can see all the way people not only express their talents, but how they problem solve,
Yeah,
which is so important.
yeah,
Um,
and I think sorry
oh,
to
go
cut
ahead.
you off, but I think one of the things that I just wanted to add too that is really important and I've learned throughout the years is like you have to meet people where they're at. You have to like you may have a goal and an intention, and you know where you need to go as an organization, and you see the writing on the wall, but you can't get people from A to B um, directly. You have to meet them where they're at, and like kind of the slow, like influential way to get them to that point. And
Mhm.
and so as an example, this Blocks Talks. this was something that I'd been wanting to do for months and months, but it wasn't until I had somebody that could be my partner to like really get it off the
Right.
ground is that it worked. Or another example, giving feedback is so hard for my team. They admit it. We are not great at it. We have an aversion to thinking that we're hurting people's feelings. And so one of the things that I've been slowly trying to do is, I introduced the exercise feed forward. And so basically it's after reviews, or at certain points in the year when you've done some self-reflection, thinking about where do you want to be in 6 months, and then instead of getting feedback on like how you did in the previous 6 months, your peers give you ideas and advice for how to move forward. And so, if someone wanted to learn more about our customers and what they're interested in, like, what are they using, then it was like, oh, okay, here, let me give you ideas for who to talk to and who to reach out to on how to do that. And so this idea of feed forward, and my idea there was, I'm meeting my team where they're at. They're not just going to go off and give 360 feedback now. They need to have a little bit of a warm up to it, and so feed forward was a much easier way to do that. Or now I'm going to be launching a tool called Windmill, which is like a Slack AI bot. Very cool company, where my team will be able to reach out to each other and say, "Hey, can you give me feedback on that presentation and how I put together that deck?" And the bot will help enable that and also help do some like coaching as well. If I said, "Oh, can you ask Bill for some feedback?"
Mhm.
It'll say like it's been engineered to be able to say, "Well, what specific feedback do you want, and from what specifically?" So yeah, so again, just the importance of meeting your team where they're at.
And which is awesome. So what does the future of learning look like at LiveBlocks, and what's your vision for the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, so I always start with where's the business going,
Right.
and always making sure that I'm not putting things into place because that's just the HR L&D thing to do, but actually like what is the goal here? And so, you know, uh, I start with our product. So interestingly, again, our product is focused on enabling human and AI collaboration, and so being able to work with an AI coworker essentially, in any sort of digital product. And so one of the things I think about is like, okay, well, if the future of AI and how we work is going to be with AI coworkers, how is that similar and different to working with humans? And so I think a lot about the collaboration skills that we need when we're and in our written communication, right? It's not about prompt engineering, I think it's as it is about having a lot of clarity in what you are asking. Um, and so I think a lot about that. I think about, all the studies and stuff that have shown that it is more folks who are more senior in their careers who have experience managing people, leading people, managing teams that are actually leveraging AI more effectively because they know how to delegate. They know how to, review and edit what less experienced, more junior folks create or build, or write. And so I think a lot about, okay, well, uh, we don't have a lot of people managers on my team, and
Mhm.
written communication is really important to us. So how do we continue to build those skills on the team to make you know concise, uh, being really concise in your asks, providing clear context, knowing when to delegate, especially as a small team. How can we leverage automation, and and thinking about it that way. Um, what I do worry about is uh, what parts of humanity we're going to lose by getting used to
Mm.
collaborating with AI bots. I think about I've got 3 young kids and we have Alexa, and I've found myself realizing that my please and thank yous, aren't as, frequent as they were once because I'm so used to just telling Alexa to add something to my grocery list, and my girls are doing that too, and so forcing myself to use please and thank yous, and how that has now translated into my human to human communication where I'm not using my please and thank yous. My girls aren't using their please and thank yous, and how, you know, I'm worried about, then what the back and forth is with that. But yeah, and then of course the critical thinking pieces, et cetera. But yeah, those are some of the things that I think about of kind of where we're going. And then as a company, as we're scaling, as we're bringing more people to the team, how are we again continuing to update our operating system and how we work and why we work? I say this all the time of like, uh, I believe that the Griner curve provides such a great opportunity to have the conversations of what are the challenge points that we're going to be hitting, and how are we going to prepare for that. And so I also go back to there, to think about where are we in our context of our business growth, and what are some of the things that we could be doing there.
Mhm. Yeah, those are all very powerful things to think about. And do you have any final thoughts for our listeners and viewers out there in podcast land?
Um, I think number one, first and foremost, if you haven't already, even if you're just an L&D department of one, as I was once upon a time, um, think about your operating system. Think about how you work, what it means to provide clarity, alignment, and effectiveness.
Mhm.
Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to share the templates that I have. And that would be number one. And then number two, is making sure that you always go back to purpose. And usually the most simple answer is the right one, to at least get some, get some data. And I think the other piece that I'll add specifically to L&D is that again, it's such a critical function in an organization, and I'm so thankful that I got to work in L&D for the time that I did because I learned so much about every other function through it. Yeah, just so many. Um, it, it's truly a valuable skill set, to be able to interface with so many different functions and understand, uh, what folks need.
It's so true. It's so true. Well, Alicia, thank you for being part of our discussion today. It was wonderful speaking with you.
You too, Bill. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. And everybody, stay tuned. We'll have more episodes and you can take another step with us on the perfect route.